March 17th, 2008. The city of Phoenix stretched out like a glowing sea under the desert moon, its countless lights forming rivers of gold and white across the sprawling urban grid. Alejandro Alex Ruiz leaned on the rail of his penthouse balcony, the crisp air brushing against his face. Below him, the city thrived, a vibrant organism fueled by his empire's shadows. But tonight, his mind was elsewhere, consumed by the woman waiting inside. Inside the penthouse, Isabel Mendez stood by the window, her figure framed by the glittering skyline. Her crimson silk dress clung to her form, its delicate straps baring her shoulders. Her dark, wavy hair cascaded down her back, and her deep brown eyes reflected the flickering lights of the city. Isabel's beauty was undeniable, but tonight, a shadow of doubt clouded her expression as she gazed out at the bustling world she felt increasingly isolated from. Alex walked back inside, his footsteps silent on the marble floor. His suit jacket, custom-tailored in charcoal gray, framed his broad shoulders perfectly, and his tie hung loose, an unusual sign of his relaxed demeanor. His intense gaze softened as he approached Isabel, though there was still an edge of control in his presence. "You've been quiet tonight," he said, his deep voice tinged with curiosity. Isabel turned, her eyes locking with his. "Just thinking," she replied, her tone measured. About as Alex tilted his head slightly, intrigued. And her lips curved into a faint smile, though her eyes betrayed her inner conflict. "And I wonder where this ends." For a moment, Alex didn't reply. He hated the way doubt crept into their moments together. With Isabel, he felt something he hadn't allowed himself to feel in years: vulnerability. But he couldn't afford to show it. Instead, he took her hand, his touch firm but tender. "You don't have to wonder," he said softly, his voice carrying an air of quiet command. "You know how I feel about you." Isabel let him hold her hand, but her mind raced. She wasn't sure what scared her more, the intensity of his devotion or the consequences of disappointing him. As the night deepened, Alex and Isabel shared a quiet dinner at the sleek marble table in the penthouse's open-plan kitchen. The air between them felt heavy, weighed down by unspoken fears. Isabel toyed with her wine glass, her gaze drifting toward Alex. He was a man of contradictions, gentle with her, yet ruthless in his world. "What's on your mind?" Alex asked, breaking the silence. "Do you ever think about leaving all this behind?" Isabel asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Alex leaned back in his chair, a faint smile playing on his lips. "What would I do? Sell real estate? Open a taco stand?" He joked, but there was an edge to his words. "No," Isabel said firmly, her eyes meeting his. "I mean really leave. Walk away. Start over for the first time." Alex's expression hardened. "This is who I am, Isabel. You knew that from the beginning." Later, as Alex answered a phone call on the balcony, Isabel watched him from inside. His voice was low, almost a growl, as he gave terse instructions to someone on the other end. She couldn't hear the details, but the way his jaw clenched told her enough. This was his world, a world of danger, deals, and violence. A world she no longer wanted to be a part of. That night, Isabel lay awake in Alex's bed, her back to him. She listened to his steady breathing, her thoughts racing. She couldn't deny the pull she felt toward him, but she knew it would destroy her if she stayed. Yet leaving him felt just as dangerous. Alex stirred and wrapped an arm around her waist, pulling her closer. For a moment, she let herself feel the warmth of his embrace. But even as she closed her eyes, her decision had been made. March 18th, 2008. The morning sun painted the Phoenix skyline in hues of gold and pink, but inside Alejandro Ruiz's penthouse, the air was cold and tense. Isabel stood by the kitchen counter, a steaming cup of coffee in her hands. She hadn't slept much, her mind preoccupied with the choice she had resolved to make. As Alex approached her, impeccably dressed in a tailored navy suit, she forced a smile, but he could sense something was off. "You're up early," Alex said, his tone more observation than question. "I couldn't sleep," Isabel replied, avoiding his gaze. Alex studied her for a moment before nodding. "You shouldn't worry so much. I'll take care of everything." He kissed her forehead before heading out, leaving Isabel alone with her thoughts. She watched the elevator doors close behind him, her chest tightening. She knew she had to act fast. Later that day, Isabel found herself in Alex's office. It wasn't the first time she had been there, but this time she wasn't admiring the luxury, it was the secret she sought. The room was an extension of Alex himself: dark wood furniture, leather chairs, and a wall lined with books that were rarely read. On his desk, a single folder caught her eye. It was labeled Victor Perez. Her hands trembled as she flipped it open. Inside were photos, transaction records, and a list of names. It didn't take long to realize she was looking at evidence of Alex's cartel operations. As she read further, she found something even more disturbing: proof that Alex had ordered the death of one of his lieutenants, a man he had once called a friend. The sound of a door opening made Isabel freeze. She hurriedly closed the folder and placed it back where she'd found it, her heart pounding. When she turned, one of Alex's men, Raul, stood in the doorway. He was in his late 30s, with a muscular frame and a face hardened by years of loyalty to Alex. "What are you doing in here?" Raul asked, his voice low and suspicious. "I was just looking for Alex," Isabel lied, forcing a smile. "He left something for me, but I couldn't find it." Raul didn't move, his eyes narrowing. After a moment he stepped aside, motioning for her to leave. Isabel walked past him, her breath shallow, knowing she'd narrowly avoided disaster. That evening, Alex returned home later than usual, his face lined with stress. He barely acknowledged Isabel as he poured himself a drink. "Long day?" she asked cautiously. "Victor," Alex muttered. "That bastard is testing my patience." Isabel's stomach churned. She remembered the name from the folder and wondered just how far Alex would go to silence him. She tried to change the subject. "Maybe you should take a break, get away from all this." Alex laughed bitterly. "There's no away in my world, Isabel. You know that." Later that night, while Alex was distracted by another phone call, Isabel began packing a small suitcase. She moved quickly, grabbing only essentials and the necklace Alex had given her when they first met. Her hands shook as she zipped the bag, her resolve strengthening with every passing second. She sent a message to Victor Perez, the man Alex had been obsessing over. She didn't trust him completely, but he was her best chance at escaping Alex's grasp. The message was simple: "I need out. Can you help?" As she lay in bed beside Alex, Isabel felt the weight of her decision pressing down on her. He reached for her hand in the dark, and for a fleeting moment she felt a pang of guilt. But the images from the folder and the sound of his ruthless orders replayed in her mind, drowning out any doubt. The die was cast. March 19th, 2008. The desert sun rose over Phoenix, its golden rays casting long shadows across the city streets. Isabel sat in a coffee shop on the outskirts of town, nervously stirring her untouched cup of tea. The place was quiet, except for the low hum of conversation from a couple of patrons. Across the table sat Victor Perez, the man she had reached out to the previous night. He was in his early 40s, lean but with an edge that hinted at a dangerous past. "You're asking for a lot," Victor said, his voice low. He leaned back in his chair, studying Isabel with sharp, calculating eyes. "You know what Alex will do if he finds out you've come to me." "I don't care," Isabel said, her voice firmer than she felt. "I need out. You said you wanted to take him down. This is your chance." Victor smirked, impressed by her boldness. "You're braver than I thought." "Stupid, but brave." Victor slid a burner phone across the table. "Here," he said. "Keep this on you. I'll let you know when it's safe to move. But if you think this ends cleanly, you're deluding yourself." Isabel hesitated before taking the phone. She knew Victor was right. There was no clean way out of Alex's world. But she was willing to risk everything. "I don't need clean," Isabel replied. "I just need gone." Back at the penthouse, Alex sensed something was off. Isabel's smile seemed forced, her touch distant. That afternoon, while she was out, he began to piece together fragments of her recent behavior. Alex wasn't a man who missed details, and his instincts told him something was wrong. He called Raul into his office. The enforcer stood rigidly by the desk, his broad shoulders tense. "Follow her," Alex said bluntly. "I want to know where she goes, who she talks to." And Raul, he paused, his dark eyes narrowing. "If she's lying to me, I want to know why." Raul nodded without a word, his expression unreadable. That evening, Isabel returned to the penthouse, the tension between her and Alex palpable. He poured them both glasses of wine, his movements smooth but deliberate. "Long day?" he asked, his tone deceptively casual. "It was fine," Isabel replied, her voice tight. Alex leaned closer, his gaze locking onto hers. "You seem distracted lately, Isabel. Is there something you want to tell me?" She froze, her mind racing for an answer. "I'm just tired, Alex." That's all for a moment. He didn't respond, his intense stare burning into her. Then, he smiled a gesture that didn't reach his eyes. "Get some rest. You'll need it." As Isabel lay in bed that night, she clutched the burner phone Victor had given her. She typed out a single message when she hit send and waited, her heart pounding. Minutes later, the phone buzzed with a reply: "Tomorrow. Be ready." The weight of her decision settled heavily on her chest. Tomorrow, she would leave behind the life she had built with Alex, and with it, the danger and chaos that defined it. But she also knew Alex wouldn't let her go easily. Unbeknownst to Isabel, Raul had already been watching her. From a car parked down the street, he saw her meeting Victor earlier that day. Now, he sat in Alex's office, recounting every detail. "She met with Perez," Raul said, his voice steady. "They're planning something. I don't know what yet, but it doesn't look good." Alex's face darkened, his jaw tightening. "Victor," he muttered. "That snake's been waiting for an opportunity." He stood abruptly, pacing the room. "Find out everything. And if Isabel tries to run, bring her to me. Alive." As the clock ticked past midnight, Isabel sat by the window, staring at the city she was about to leave behind. She felt a pang of sadness but quickly pushed it away. This wasn't about loss, it was about survival. Tomorrow, everything would change. March 20th, 2008. The sun dipped below the Phoenix skyline, casting the city in a fiery glow. Isabel stood at the edge of a secluded gas station on the outskirts of town, her small suitcase at her feet. She clutched the burner phone tightly, her heart racing. Victor had told her to wait there for a car, but every passing minute felt like an eternity. She scanned the horizon, her nerves frayed. In the distance, a black SUV approached. Her relief was fleeting. The vehicle was too sleek, too familiar. It wasn't Victor, it was Alex. The SUV screeched to a halt, and Alex stepped out, his face a mask of fury and betrayal. Raul followed close behind, his hand resting on the grip of a holstered gun. Isabel's breath caught in her throat as Alex approached, his movements slow and deliberate. "You weren't even going to say goodbye," Alex said, his voice low and venomous. "After everything I've done for you." Isabel backed away, her hands trembling. "You don't own me, Alex. I can't live like this anymore." Alex's expression darkened. "You think you can just walk away? From me?" From all of this, he gestured to the empty desert around them, his voice rising. "There's no escape, Isabel. You knew that when you got involved." Isabel's resolve hardened. She dropped the suitcase and squared her shoulders. "This isn't love, Alex. This is a prison. And I won't be your prisoner anymore." Alex's jaw clenched, and for a moment the fury in his eyes flickered into something else: hurt, betrayal, perhaps even fear. But it was gone as quickly as it appeared. "You don't get to make that choice," he said coldly. "Not anymore." Raul moved closer, but Alex held up a hand to stop him. "This is between us," Alex said. "Stay back." Isabel took a step backward, her eyes darting toward the open road. But before she could move, Alex lunged. He grabbed her arm, his grip bruising. "Let me go," Isabel shouted, struggling against him. The struggle turned violent in an instant. Isabel shoved Alex, breaking free for a moment, but he was faster. He grabbed her again, this time pinning her against the side of the SUV. Her hand reached blindly for something, anything, and found a heavy wrench lying near the gas pump. She swung it wildly, striking Alex's arm. Alex recoiled, clutching his arm, but his rage boiled over. He charged at Isabel, his hands wrapping around her throat. "You betrayed me," he snarled, his voice trembling with a mix of fury and heartbreak. Raul stepped forward, his hand twitching near his gun, but he hesitated. Alex's voice rang out, commanding and sharp. "Stay out of it." Isabel gasped for air, clawing at Alex's hands, but his grip didn't loosen. In one desperate move, she kneed him in the stomach, sending him stumbling back. She scrambled toward her suitcase, but Alex recovered quickly, pulling her back. The final blow came without warning. In a blind fit of rage, Alex slammed Isabel against the SUV, her head striking the metal with a sickening thud. She crumpled to the ground, motionless. Alex staggered back, his chest heaving. His hands trembled as he looked down at Isabel's lifeless body, blood pooling beneath her head. Raul approached cautiously, his face pale. "She's gone," Raul said, his voice barely above a whisper. The reality of what he had done hit Alex like a freight train. His fury evaporated, replaced by a hollow, numbing despair. "Clean this up," he muttered to Raoul, his voice flat and detached. "What do you want me to do?" Raoul asked, his voice shaky. Alex turned away, unable to look at Isabel's body. "Make it look like a cartel hit." "Burn everything," Raoul nodded, already pulling out his phone to make arrangements. Alex climbed back into the SUV, his hands still trembling. He stared out at the dark desert road ahead, the weight of his actions pressing down on him like an iron vice. As the SUV roared away, the flames of the burning gas station lit up the night sky. Alex didn't look back. He couldn't. The woman he had loved, the woman who had been his weakness, was gone, and with her, the last piece of his humanity. March 21st, 2008. The smell of smoke lingered in the desert air as the charred remains of the gas station smoldered beneath the morning sun. Investigators swarmed the site, their voices low but urgent as they documented the scene. Among the rubble, they found the body of a woman unrecognizable, but the necklace she wore told part of the story. Detective Elena Vasquez stood at the edge of the scene, her sharp eyes scanning the devastation. A seasoned investigator, she'd seen her share of cartel violence, but something about this felt different. It wasn't just another hit. There was something personal in the brutality. Meanwhile, in his penthouse, Alejandro Ruiz sat in his darkened office, nursing a glass of whiskey. The curtains were drawn, and the usually pristine space was cluttered papers scattered across the desk, an untouched plate of food on the coffee table. He hadn't slept. The image of Isabel's lifeless body haunted him, replaying in his mind every time he closed his eyes. Raoul entered the room quietly, his usual confidence replaced with unease. "It's done," he said. "They found the body." "The police think it's a cartel hit," Alex nodded, but his expression didn't change. "Good. Make sure it stays that way," Raoul hesitated. "And Victor, find him," Alex said coldly. "He's next." Detective Vasquez wasted no time delving into the case. The necklace found at the scene was a key piece of evidence, engraved with initials that linked it to Isabel Mendez. A quick background check revealed her connection to Alejandro Ruiz. Vasquez had long suspected Alex of being at the heart of Phoenix's cartel activity, but she'd never been able to prove it. She called her partner over, holding up the report. "Ruiz, this isn't just a hit, it's personal. We need to dig deeper." Over the next few days, Alex's empire began to crack. Word of Isabel's death spread through the ranks, and whispers of betrayal grew louder. Victor Perez, knowing he was being hunted, went underground, but not before leaking damning information to Vasquez. Bank records, coded messages, and details of Alex's operations began to paint a clearer picture of his cartel's reach. At the same time, Alex's paranoia deepened. He became more erratic, lashing out at his men and making reckless decisions. The once untouchable kingpin was unraveling, his guilt and fear consuming him. Detective Vasquez and her team closed in. The leaked information gave them enough to secure a warrant for Alex's properties. On March 24th, the penthouse was raided. Alex was caught off guard, his usual composure shattered as the police stormed in. Vasquez stood in the doorway, her eyes locking onto Alex's. "Alejandro Ruiz, you're under arrest for conspiracy, trafficking, and murder." Alex didn't resist. For the first time in his life, he felt empty. As they cuffed him and led him away, he glanced back at the penthouse, the symbol of his power and his undoing. In the weeks that followed, Alex's cartel crumbled. With Victor's leaks and Raoul's eventual confession, the case against him grew airtight. But it wasn't the legal consequences that weighed heaviest on Alex, it was the loss of Isabel. Sitting alone in his prison cell, Alex stared at a small photo he had managed to keep of her. It was taken before everything fell apart, back when they still believed in their love. He ran his thumb over her face, his mind haunted by the sound of her voice and the look of betrayal in her eyes. Detective Vasquez stood on the balcony of her own modest apartment, watching the city lights twinkle. She felt a sense of closure knowing Alex was finally behind bars, but she also knew the cost of getting him there. Isabel had paid the ultimate price, and her story would never be fully told. In the end, Alex's empire was destroyed not by a rival cartel or a police operation, but by the very thing he sought to protect: love.